The weekend is just around the corner. You've been working hard. You've been working hard to manage your nutrition, to stick on track with your diet, whether you are trying to lose weight, lose body fat, build muscle, or even just maybe maintain where you're at and what you've achieved. You've been thinking consciously about making good food decisions, about keeping to that 80-20 rule, not necessarily eliminating those indulgences, but controlling them in a measured and considered way so that you can continue to make progress towards your fitness goals. But the weekend starts to loom large. Now, if you're like most people, during the working week, you find it not necessarily super easy to stick to your diet, but certainly you've got some semblance of control because there's a routine there. You're getting up pretty much at the same time every day to make the trek into the office. You've then got standard things that you're doing day after day. After all, work is a little bit like Groundhog Day, right? But you are doing those same sort of things. So lunch comes around at the same time. You probably eat similar foods-ish throughout the day. And again, you've got a little bit of a pattern. You've got a little bit of a rhythm when it comes to what you're eating, when you're training, going to the gym, and what you do when you come home. It's all a bit of a, not necessarily robotic or automatic, but there's certainly lots more habits and routines in that working week than there are when the weekend comes. Now, it might also be the case that when the weekend comes, you think, well, work has been stressful. I've been working hard. I've been working long hours. I've been sticking to my nutrition, but everything just feels a little bit difficult. It feels like I'm thinking about lots of things all the time, whether it's work, family, nutrition, training. All of these things just feel like added pressures that when it comes to the weekend, you just feel like, do you know what? I just need to let off some steam. I need to take my foot off the accelerator and just chill out. And sometimes that can lead to overindulgences. The lack of routine that you have at the weekend means that you don't necessarily think as consciously about your food decisions, about your nutrition, as you may otherwise have done during that working week. Now, that's not necessarily such a hugely bad thing. If you've got the right tools and the right techniques, you can absolutely do those sorts of things. You can be more relaxed when it comes to the weekend. And in fact, I would actively encourage it. But if you haven't got the right tools and techniques and you do just let this overwhelm hit you and you do sort of take your foot off the gas and you don't really have a strategy for working through that and keeping it on track, you can really undo all the progress that you've made through that working week. For example, if you've been building up a calorie deficit, let's say 250 to 500 calories of a deficit per day, that's been building up. Now, if you have drinks on a Friday night, maybe with your work colleagues, or you have date night with your partner, you go out on Saturday you go out during the day for some little day trip somewhere or something like that, or you go out for dinner in the evening, maybe you have a birthday party on the Sunday. It's quite easy if you're not really thinking about it and you haven't got those right strategies for your calories to basically equalize that deficit you've built up in the working week, or even go into a surplus and you actually end up putting on weight. So managing that weekend process, avoiding that weekend binge is hugely important if you want to make consistent progress to your weight and fat loss goals. Now, you should also bear in mind that life is there to be lived. You want to be making memories. You want to be enjoying life. You don't want to be restricted by your nutrition so much that actually you fear the weekend all the time. So this episode of the podcast is about giving you some thoughts, some ideas, some practical things that you can implement so that you don't fear the weekend and you can avoid the weekend binge, but you can also make sure that you're enjoying life and all those different social things that you're having. So I've made some notes down here of all of the different things that I think that you can practically implement that are going to help you here. Now, it's one of these things that when I think about what the first thing is I would ask a client to start to do, what's the first tool that I would start to talk about with them? And the first thing that would literally just be planning ahead and managing calories. Now, when I look at the habits that I teach people, it's literally the first one. the first thing that I get people to do is start to manage, to think about calories, to be aware of, what calories are higher in, what foods are higher in calorie than others. And planning really comes down to really taking the time out. It doesn't need to be long, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, literally just to look at what is ahead. So don't let the weekend creep up on you out of nowhere. It's kind of always happening. That kind of calendar thing, we've got that pretty much into a rhythm now, haven't we? Weekend comes round every Saturday, every Sunday, it's there. It's not a surprise. Now, most people will know what things are happening at the weekend. Now, obviously things happen out of the blue, you don't really plan for or unexpected, you do something spontaneous, that's cool. But a lot of the time, you know what's coming, and you know what's coming for a long, long time. So don't get to Friday and think, oh shit, I've got that birthday party to go to tomorrow. What the fuck am I gonna do with my nutrition? Actually, you probably knew about that birthday party several weeks ago. So I would say take some time, maybe on a Sunday, to look forward at the week ahead. What is it that's on the horizon? What's on the agenda that could mean, right, okay, I'm going to need more calories on this day because I'm literally going to be having food. So I maybe want to say, well, I'm going to have less on one day of the week or less on a couple of days of the week, and I'm going to increase the amount of calories that I have available on that Saturday or Sunday or whichever day of the week it is. Now, you don't need to be a calorie tracker to do that. You can do this in a non-tracking way as well. It's just that thought process of saying, well, even though I'm not tracking calories, clearly I'm going to eat more on this day, or I'm going to drink more, or literally just going to consume more calories. I'm aware enough of calorie intake to know that I'm not going to kid myself and say, yeah, I'm going to go to a birthday party, I'm going to go for this, I'm going to go to a restaurant, and I'm gonna eat 1,000 calories. It's just not gonna fucking happen. So what you need to make sure is that you don't necessarily fight the process. You don't take Tupperware to the restaurant for date night. You don't say to the waiter, excuse me, you haven't got egg whites on the menu, so I've brought my own with me. Could you cook me this egg white omelette, maybe with no butter? Have you got a 1-calorie spray that you could use? I don't want any cheese, anything like that. Maybe just a little bit of chicken, but make sure you weigh the chicken for me, please. You're not gonna have this freaking conversation in a restaurant. So don't kid yourself or panic yourself or have too much anxiety or fear about going to a restaurant. Manage your nutrition around that so that you can enjoy that day, but you've already managed it so you can feel really relaxed. For example, if you cut back on calories for 5 days of the week, a little bit more than maybe your current target, that might give you anywhere between 500, maybe 700, maybe a bit more calories to then add to that meal. And once you add like 700,000 calories to one particular meal, you can pretty much eat anything and feel really relaxed about that process. So again, it's about thinking ahead, making conscious decisions about your nutrition that are really going to work in your advantage. Now, what I would do then is really make that a solid habit. And again, this is something that I would be talking about with my clients as we go through a process of teaching them some of the tools and techniques that they need in order to manage their nutrition. Because when I'm coaching someone, and what I would urge you to do is think about not just what's happening in this current dieting phase, but are you building up the habits that in the future are going to allow you to be in a non-tracking method of managing your nutrition. So maybe when you've achieved your goal and you're just looking to maintain, again, you don't want to be stuck in a MyFitnessPal prison. MyFitnessPal is a great tool. It's a great tool to be used at different times during different phases of your life. It may be a case that you achieve fat loss, you go to maintenance, you don't track, but then maybe you want to do a specific 8-week fat loss program just prior to a holiday or something like that, and you pull out MyFitnessPal from the toolbox. It's a great tool to be used, but you don't want to feel like you are trapped by it. That's the key thing. You want to be, as you're going through a fat loss phase, be understanding about nutrition, about strategies, about ways in which you can manage your nutrition in the post-dieting phase so that you can live this sustainable life, this leaner, healthier life, without having to worry about food all the time. So these habits are something that I literally start with day one from a client. And I would certainly urge you to not dismiss this sort of stuff as, okay, this is just bullshit. It's all airy-fairy crap about planning, about gratitude. I don't really do that. I'm not into all of that sort of rubbish. There's actually a clear, constructive thought process behind it to help you get to a stage where post-dieting, I can manage my nutrition. I've got habits that I can fall back on. I don't need my fitness pal because I've got things that I know about nutrition that work. So make sure you're doing these sorts of things. Allocate some time, specific time every week to do this sort of thing. The other thing that I would say is don't think of foods as good and bad, and don't over restrict. Now, you want to limit processed foods, refined sugars in your diet. That's probably a good thing because those foods are easy to overeat. They're very highly palatable. They're not necessarily going to be as filling as other types of food. So when you're in a dieting phase, it's probably not a good idea to have the majority of your diet with containing processed foods, refined sugars. But it doesn't mean that they're bad, and it certainly doesn't mean you can never have them. You've just got to make sure that you are managing them well. You are making considered choices. You are, the classic 80-20 rule. You are making sure that most of your diet is filled with whole foods like your fresh fruits, vegetables, lean meats, dairy, all of these sorts of things. That's what's taking up the majority of your diet. But you're not thinking of this big epic freaking moral decision to say, well, if I have a donut, then I'm siding with the devil. But if I have a stick of broccoli, then the angel is sitting on my shoulder. The dieting angels love me, and now I'm going to lose so much weight. The thing is that as soon as you start labeling food as good and bad, is that you create, even if it's subconscious and you don't realize it, you're creating your own fears around food. You're creating barriers, obstacles, so that when you get to the weekend and someone says, hey, Sue, or John, whatever your name is, do you want a donut, or do you want this, or do you want that, or do you want to go out for a meal at a restaurant? Immediately, rather than saying, you know what, this is going to be an enjoyable experience. Going out for a meal with my partner is going to be amazing. Instead of that being your first response, because you've got this, oh shit, we're going to be going for that, and maybe we're going to the cinema and we're going to have nachos and fucking hot dogs and shit and ice cream. Instantly, you create a fear response to say, fuck, no, that sounds bad. How do I avoid this situation? How do I pick up the phone to my friend and say, yeah, Steve, this thing's come up, yeah, sorry, can't get out of it, yeah. So you just fucking avoid it. Or you are the pain in the ass partner that only picks restaurants that are available in my fitness pal. So nothing wrong with Nando's is great, but going to Nando's every single freaking week probably gets a bit boring for your partner and probably winds up making them get rid of you in the end because you're a boring mofo who only goes to Nando's or brings your Tupperware to a restaurant. So eliminating foods because they're bad is a bad thing to do. Limiting foods and thinking of them as, okay, this food is not bad, it's just more calorie dense and has fewer nutrients than this other food. So I'm going to pick the lower calorie dense food, and I'm going to pick the higher nutrient food more often. But if I want this food, I know I can have it, and I can have it guilt-free, without shame, and I can still make progress with my nutrition. The other thing you want to do is tell other people what the fuck you're doing. Because if you are a person who is feeling quite isolated, you're on a diet, you're trying to manage calories, but you've not told anyone, no one knows what they need to do to help you. Because subconsciously, people will often tempt you with treats because they want you to enjoy yourself. They want you to enjoy life. They want to be around you. They want to, spend some time with you. So they try to make all these nice things, do all these nice things, but if you don't tell them how you feel, or that you're on a diet or something like that, or what you're trying to achieve and why you're trying to achieve it, they're unnecessarily, or unknowingly, should I say, tempting you and giving you all these things that you don't want. But if you tell someone that, you know what, I'm doing this dieting process, it's for the next 12 weeks, I just want to lose a little bit of body fat, and so on and so on and so on. So it would really help me if you did this. Or we can go out for drinks on this day, but I really want to just go out for drinks once or twice a week. I don't really want to make it a 7-day bender or whatever. So think about that. Tell other people, the people that are around you, the important people in your life, tell them what you're doing, why you're doing it, get them engaged in the process, and help yourself by letting other people know what you're doing. The other thing is to create something called an implementation intention. Now, this is something from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I recommend that you go out and get if you haven't already. Now, what he talks about here is these things called if-then scenarios. And this is again about thinking ahead. It's about over time creating these automatic responses that help you to manage your nutrition. So it might be a case of you say, if I go over my calories more than I planned, then I am going to do this. Or if I get in a situation where I get to a restaurant and I want to have dessert, then I'm going to do this. So you're already creating all of these scenarios that you've already thought about. Or maybe that something happens and then you reflect on it and you say, if this happens again, then I'm going to do this. And you create all of these implementation intentions. So subconsciously, you are getting all of these ideas into your brain that become automatic responses. Now, the classic one I've used outside of a weekend binge is a lot of people in the office get to that mid-afternoon stage, 3 p.m., where they kind of get a little bit snack crazy. It's a case of you've had lunch, but dinner feels really freaking far away, and you've got this like dead spot, 3 p.m., work's kind of winding down a little bit maybe, but you just kind of then try and drift towards the vending machine. Chocolate seems to have this calling for you. It seems to call your name from afar and says, eat me, bitch, eat me. So you have that feeling. Now, an implementation intention there would be, if I feel hungry at 3 p.m., then I'm going to go for a walk, go talk to someone, take my mind off of food. I'm going to eat the snack that I brought with me rather than going to the vending machine. Again, you're recognizing that these things happen, these events pop up, and maybe they're regular, maybe they're not, but you are creating implementation intentions that help you manage your way forward through that. So create these if-then scenarios. And if something happens that takes you off track, reflect on it. Why did it happen? If it happens again, then what can you do differently? A little bit like I've just mentioned there, another one to do would be have snacks available. Depends on what you're doing at the weekend, obviously, but having snacks available with you or in the house or something like that that are less calorie dense, nutrient heavy, those sorts of things can help you if you are in that stage where, because you're in the house maybe a bit more, maybe you're a little bit bored sometimes, and you drift towards the fridge, you drift towards food as you're kind of calling to kind of eat through some of that time. If you've got snacks available that are more low calorie, high nutrient, again, it's just going to help you stay on track a little bit more. The other thing off the back of that is do some fucking stuff. Don't let yourself get bored. Plan stuff, do stuff, be active, go out and do things so that you are not bored, so that you're not sat there constantly thinking about food. Make sure that you are, as much as possible, keeping yourself busy, keeping your mind busy, keep an active lifestyle. And that's where I would also then bring in another point. Create a positive routine around the weekend. There's nothing wrong with having some form of routine across the weekend. It doesn't necessarily have to be as detailed as your normal weekday routine, which is probably quite well mapped out and driven by work and things like that. But you could have something that says, on a Saturday morning, you know what, I'm going to go to the gym. We're going to go to the gym for an hour, first thing in the morning. That's going to set you up for the day. If that's now your routine, that's something that's easy to stick to. It's your like anchor point, as The Rock would say. That's the thing that's going to get your weekend kickstarted in the right way and get you off on a good footing. Try to create that particular weekend routine. It might also be that somewhere in there you've got some meal prep. You've got, maybe you even eat at similar times. Even if you are, you're not going to go out for lunch and dinner every weekend or, every Saturday and Sunday. So on those days that you don't do those sorts of things, have you got regular meal times? Again, to avoid like mindless snacking and things like this. It just becomes a case of Some of these things seem a little bit onerous. Like, there's a lot to fucking think about here, Simon. Can you fucking simplify this? And it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So you don't necessarily have to implement everything I've been talking about, but maybe just pick the things that seem to stick out to you, saying that could be really useful for me. Work on that, implement that, make it work for you, and then move on to something else. And in terms of like regular meal times or creating a positive routine around your weekend and your food and things like that, treat it as a positive thing, that you are actually creating a habit that might feel a little bit like, okay, I'm thinking about this way too fucking much. But actually, when you start to do it more frequently, it becomes automatic. So you never really end up consciously thinking about some of this stuff further down the line. It's a bit like when you're training. For example, when you're doing bench pressing, something like that, you're thinking, right, okay, what position, hands on bar, where do I put my hands on the bar? Scapular retraction, hold that back, shoulder blades, pin back down, arch back. You're thinking of all the different component parts of that bench press because it's new. But when you do that multiple times over multiple weeks and months, you get to the point where you don't even think about it. It just happens. You just get into the right bench press position. You just lift the weight and you're doing the right thing. And it's the same with these habits. It can feel like it's a lot to think about. But once you start implementing, once you start doing, once you start repeating, it becomes easy, it becomes automatic. So just like anything, whether that's in training, in life in general, probably when it's first up, you got to think about it a little bit more. You got to think about doing these things a little bit more consciously. But the more effort you put in up front like that, is the less that you're going to have to do further down the line. And the last one I want to leave you with is practice mindfulness. So we talked a little bit about boredom and snacking and things like that. So mindfulness, for me in this context, would be about just stopping. If you feel like that you are constantly going to the fridge and constantly just raiding the cupboards because you're a little bit bored or you can't find anything to do and you just want to snack and watch TV, just stop yourself and think to yourself, do I really want this food? Am I eating this because I am genuinely hungry? Or am I eating it just out of boredom and just because it's there? And then just take a moment to say, okay, am I actually going to eat this? Do I want it? Could I have something else? Ask yourself these questions so that you make a more informed decision. Now, it might be that you still go and eat those foods. It might be that you still go and eat the calorie-dense foods, and that's fine. But you've consciously thought about it. You've consciously made a considered decision. So they would be the things that I would get you to start thinking about in terms of avoiding those weekend binges. So that works right from planning right up front through to all of the things you're going to do across the weekend to manage that nutrition. But the big thing I want you to take away from this episode is that the weekend is something that should not be feared. It's not something that you need to shy away from, to avoid, to phone your friends and make excuses because you can't track shit in MyFitnessPal. That's not the way to live a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. It's about more than just, thinking about foods in this kind of negative way. You've got to create that positive relationship with food. So hopefully you've taken something away from this. I really do want you to implement some of these things that we've talked about, and then I would love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear if you had any light bulb moments, clarity, anything like that. If you did, come and visit me on Instagram. It's at iron_paradise_fitness. I would love to hear what you've got to say about the show. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.